Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, a podcast that addresses the do's, don'ts, and dynamics of the digital ecosystem specific to higher education. I'm your host, Li Fowler. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in higher education social media management and marketing. Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is a part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. I am super excited to have Kellen Manning here with me today. Kellen currently works as the Director of Digital Public Relations for the Office of Strategic Communications at Penn State University, where he oversees the long-term strategy of the flagship Penn State social media accounts and the social media team. And in the past, he has worked at Boston University, MIT, and Harvard in digital and social media roles across alumni relations, student life, admissions, and undergraduate communications. Kellen,
Hello.
welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. I think it's just fitting that you are my first guest on Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager because I feel like you were there at the start of my journey at MIT.
Yeah, you were just like
I feel like
you were just a voice on a phone call, random phone call, asking me about a job, asking me a job you were applying for.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I think I'm going to apply for this job. Can you tell me more? And you were always super welcoming and super supportive. And I'm a real fan of how you, how you go about managing teams. So let's start off with how you got into social media. Did it find you or did you find it?
I think technically it's a little bit of both. It was completely accidental. I remember like 2009, I was looking for what could be my final project in grad school. I had no idea. And at the time, like Twitter was just becoming like a thing. Like most of the tweets at the time were like everyone teaching people how to use Twitter. It was like Ashton Kutcher and like Alyssa Milano like giving advice, and Questlove. It was crazy. And then Facebook was really big, and then there were a few other ones like Tumblr was still just around the corner. But I was like, oh, okay. What if I decide to call a bunch of like municipalities around the country and ask them how they're using social media and if they have a strategy, and then build a report based off how people are doing it. Let's see what that is. And in the meantime, I went to work for the municipality I lived in to like be like their digital person as like an unpaid intern for like the length of my my semester. And so when I came to, I ended up calling people in North Carolina, Colorado, like all around the country, asking like, how are you using Facebook? How are you using social? Or like, what are your thoughts on it? Like, and I just picking up a bunch of things, and I put together this like social media report in like 2009 about like how I thought that Cranberry Township, which is the place I worked in, how they should be utilizing social media, like the tips that I picked up from other schools, like what I think works. And then I just did that, and then flash forward, I'm looking for a job afterwards, and Boston University calls me and they asked me if I have any experience. And I said, well, nothing like actual, but I did do this whole project that I can send you. And from there, I got hired as a temp to be like their communications coordinator for the Alumni Association, where I was in charge of like their social media, their email marketing program, as well as their website content. That's weird. In 2011, you could be in charge of all that as just a temp. It's crazy to think of it now, like, but back then that was very easily what you could be. And then that's kind of how I just fell into it. And then from there, it's just kind of just building on.
Well, you did a fantastic job, apparently. And but yes, like I feel like these strategies have become, and these tools have become more sophisticated and how we use them. So yes, we do not condone interns to
Yeah,
taking charge of all of that,
it's funny
right?
because like when I talk to like students, like when I get brought into classes or just like having conversations with people, and I'm like, between being a temp and a temp in 2011 and a director in 2024, I'm not doing anything differently. Like I'm in because I was completely in charge of everything. No one even asked me what I was doing on Instagram in 2012 or Tumblr or Facebook, and I was just like learning and like failing and like making mistakes and then learning from those mistakes and building out what I thought made sense. And now today, it's the only difference is like I'm telling other people to do it based on things I learned when I was like not even a real employee.
You were the practitioner, like you did it and you learned. So one thing I think that you do really uniquely, or, maybe you were one of the first adopters, was you used social listening and monitoring to recruit creators. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, because like I said, when you're like a temp that grew into a full time position, but you're in charge of all these things, I didn't have a team of people I could kind of go to, so I had to figure out how can I get help? Because especially at Boston University, I didn't go to Boston University for the job. That was the first time I ever been to Boston. Was when I got hired for that. So it's like I have to learn the culture. I have to do things to connect with alumni that bring in those memories. So I just started looking around and like asking the students who were interns in other groups around me and asking them questions in terms of trying to find content. And as I went further into other jobs, whether it be MIT or Harvard, I started paying attention to what our audience was posting, whether it be alumni, students, faculty, and staff. And then I started realizing people are doing some really cool things that are highlighting the school we work for. So what's stopping me from just like reaching out to them directly, like looking for their email or sending them a DM and inviting them to come talk to me so I can learn more and then potentially work with them. And so I started kind of going forward with that, and it kind of took off from there, and a lot of really cool things to where like community engagement, community collaboration, and user generated content kind of became my staple that I kind of taken from that really started at MIT when I started doing like every week a student takes over, or like I started reaching out directly to people I thought were doing interesting things and saying, can I have this to use here? Or can you do something similar for me? And now at Penn State, I have this team of people to where I'm directing to do it, to where it's like we're reaching out, whether we see someone doing something interesting on TikTok, it's not just a repost. It's like, oh, they're doing something really cool. We could repost it, but why don't we just find their email address or just reach out to them directly on this platform and talk to them about it and see what we can kind of do in collaboration here.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. So at MIT, you were reaching out to students, right? A
Yes,
lot of them were students.
all of them are
And
students.
okay. And so when you say I liked this, was it an image? Was it a video?
It depends on the person. Like sometimes it could be like, I think this person is really funny, and I think the content they're posting, or whether it at the time, especially at the beginning of MIT, it could be Tumblr. They're writing really cool things, or they're taking really great pictures, or they're utilizing the platform in a way I haven't seen before. But I'm like, that could work for us too. So it started off with just me reaching out to
Mhm.
ask them questions like, why'd you do this? What do you get out of this? Like, how do you feel like the reaction is? And then once I get a feel for them, and I'm like, oh, I'd really like to work with this person, I get a good vibe from them. I bring up, well, would you want to do this, but for me, for a project I have in mind, and we kind of go from there.
I I love that. And the response that you got was always positive?
Yeah, so yes, and I think that was the biggest lesson that like I had to, because when I came into especially MIT, like, and I worked in their student life department to run their social media, they really didn't have a social presence at the time. So like I had to build that from scratch, and a lot of time what it was letting people know that student life existed at MIT, because that was a new concept back in 2013, 14 when I worked there, because they're like, what is student life? Like what do you do? And then there was also this idea of from people where it's like, well, MIT students don't really use social media that way, so you're not really going to be able to connect with them or engage with them. And so I just kind of set that. I'm gonna prove that wrong. So I started reaching out to them, and
And you did.
yeah, and what I found was like they at no point would anyone say no to me. Like a lot of them were like really excited just for the opportunity to represent your institution, like especially if you lead it with, I think what you're doing is awesome. I don't want you to change anything about it except, and like, just don't swear, don't do anything to get me fired, don't do anything to get you in trouble, but who you are, like these things that you're posting, this is this is what I like. And I give them examples. I'm like, I saw you did this, I love this. And if you could do that, the only thing I ask, if you're going to work with us, is just be yourself. Don't think about like, I bet they want me to sound this way, because I don't feel like that's what connects people. Like that's like almost like, that's like brochure strategy from like the 90s and
It
80s.
it's not authentic, right? We want
Exactly.
to hear, like, the authentic voice of the students and the character,
Exactly.
right?
And so, and from there, I've learned like anyone, if you, for the most part, 90%, 95% of the people you reach out to are more than willing to help you, especially if you let them know that you're reaching out because you like what they're doing.
Okay. So flash forward,
Hmm.
you're a director now. You actually have a team.
Yeah.
You have a team, but you still have brought that philosophy, right,
Hmm.
with you and onto your team. So can you tell me what your team is doing a little bit?
Yeah, so basically we're kind of I believe that every part of your social presence should be used as a tool. It's not, these aren't just places where you go to post things, and monitoring and listening shouldn't just be based off negative things. And so like that means, who are you following? Who's following you? Who are these people who are tagging you? Like, look through their content, see what they're doing. Now with like the rise of TikTok and this idea of like algorithms and For You pages, who's popping up on your For You pages connected to your community? And how can you, and how are they doing the job that you're setting out to do, is like showcasing your institution in the best light, in a way that connects them with other people and could bring people in. And then once you see them doing those things, you're like, why can't we work with them a little bit? And whether it be reaching out to them for a long-term project, which is like internship roles to pay them, or it's just a one-off to be like, oh, we see that you do all these really cool things where you're going and you're part of the club figure skating team. And every day you just record this and you're getting a ton of reactions on yours. Why don't we showcase that type of content here? We reach out to the student. We say, hey, we like that you do this. You want to do this for our page? It's kind of introducing you. We're going to do it on TikTok. We're going to do it on Instagram. You're going to be talking to your peers, prospective students, and young alumni, and showcase that experience. Or like the biggest one we did so far was when we reached out to one of the acapella groups and we said, your content like takes off on your page, so can we showcase this experience for us? And they like remade like a version of Pitch Perfect and like the riff off, and they did that, and like to date it has almost 4 million views on TikTok and over almost 2 million views on Instagram. And it's like utilizing these like stories.
And that's the idea that they came up with, right? You just said, "Create something for us."
Yeah, we set up the meeting, we introduce who we are, we talk about what we want to do, which is this idea of, first you start off with show don't tell, which is a thing I got from MIT admissions actually. Like that was a big part of that strategy. And I kind of brought it to Penn State. And then this idea of, we want to treat every part of this institution, whether it be campuses, whether it be the individual departments, students, faculty, staff, student groups, alumni, as individual puzzle pieces that stand on their own, completely unique. And you can put them up there and it tells a story that's them. But then if you look at the whole thing, you get a feel for
Mhm,
what Penn State is at this moment. And it's
mhm.
across that. And I think thinking of it that way really opens the floodgates for things such as like showing your thriving, diverse community who's doing really cool things. And you can come to Penn State and succeed by just being yourself and like growing in the directions that you choose to grow. There's
Mm.
always a path here. And I think that's something I took with me from BU to MIT to Harvard to here.
I love that description of all pieces of the puzzle. I wanna go back to what you said just a little bit earlier. And you said, um, you looked at For You, who's coming up in your For You pages, like, sort of digging in, um, and it sounds like you're doing this all organically within platform. I think a lot of times when people think social listening or monitoring, they think, "Oh, these are really, really expensive platforms or tools that you have to buy or seek out." And I think a lot of the social listening monitor can just be done within platforms organically. You just have to dig in a little bit, right? Is
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'd say most of our monitoring is done that way. Like if we're monitoring for issues, it really helps to be able to use something like Hootsuite or Talkwalker or
Sure.
Brandwatch, because then you can kind of get this aggregate of like what's the conversation happening. But as we're looking to see what our community is doing, and that's the thing I push my team to do all the time, it's like we spend probably more time watching these channels and seeing what trends are popping up, what students are doing? Is there something cool happening in a department or a lab that we can spotlight? Are there new people that we don't know about? What are the prospective students saying about us that we can kind of amplify? Can we take videos that they're creating and mash them together to make a really cool, like, this is the new class, which Courtney, my assistant director, that was the most amazing thing. She just started realizing that a bunch of students were like, they had like t-shirt day when they picked their school, and they were like doing this like, oh, Penn State, like across their chest. And she gathered like 15 videos and asked each individual student like, hey, can I use this? And just DM'd them all. And they were like, yes, sure. Yes, sure. And she ended up taking all the videos, downloading them, smashing them together using CapCut, and put out this really cool video where it's just a bunch of just the students like very happy that they got into Penn State. We posted that on TikTok. We posted it on Instagram, and it did really well. You see a bunch of high school. We already have a bunch of high school students in our mentions like, let me in, let me in. And this one is like, oh, that's me. Oh, you're famous. And it just like kind of grew from there. And so like, you don't need all those tools, especially if you're just looking for collaborators. So like, it's constantly just like digging in and then liking comments, because that helps your For You go. The more Penn State centric content and Penn State students and alumni that we engage with on these platforms, the more we're going to get back and start seeing those, so we can start seeing those. And then also keeping up like, oh, we're noticing these trends. And if you look through our DMs, like our intern teams, they're constantly DMing our account with like trends that they're picking up that they can use later. So utilizing all parts of every single platform you have may not make up 100% of what you can get from like these super strong, powerful monitoring tool platforms that exist, but it can get the job done and really create and really help you create a sense of what makes your place unique.
Totally. And I think that's super smart. So you mentioned trends, and I'm just interested to know like how you handle trends, or are they really important to your strategy?
They are, mainly because the thing that trends are basically like taking on what memes did when memes were a thing. It's like this relatable content that's told through a funny way that helps you connect, that helps you feel human, or helps you be able to connect with the human condition and experience. So like, you pull in these funny jokes, and they always seem silly, but then once you dig into them, like, you realize, oh, there's more to this than that. Like, there's a reason why so many people are using this, and so many people have these like experiences. So we pull those in, and we make sure if you're using a trend, that not only connects with like what's happening at our school, but it's also connecting with people who might just see it just because they relate to that situation. And that might lead to a student who felt like, I don't know about this school. And then that brings them and say, oh, that's exactly how I would feel. I would feel intimidated. I'd feel nervous in that situation. That sounds like a fun thing to me. Oh, that sounds like me. And that brings in more people to actually see the other things you're doing, which the stories you're trying to tell, the quote unquote important things that you want to push. When that's the idea of important is kind of like
Got it.
kind of fake to me, but
Yeah.
because I think everything is important, and that's the best way to do social. But yeah, so they're part of it. They can't be the only thing, but mixing them in, especially the ones that are appropriate, just like that makes, in terms of just like being able to not lose your job, is always good. But there's always ones that you can say, oh, I wonder how. And that's a big question that I push all the members of my team to ask, is like, oh, that's cool. I wonder how it fits into Penn State, or I wonder how it fits
Mm.
into what we want to do. Because it's basically a sickness at this point. Everything I see, whether it's while I'm working, or on TV, or on when I'm watching YouTube, or out in the open, I'm like, I wonder how I could incorporate that into what we do on Penn State Social. That's the question I ask
Yeah,
myself
no,
all
but
the time.
that's a great. I will incorporate that. That's a great practice. But pulling you back to the social media and the listening and the monitoring, you've started to reach out to faculty members. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yeah, that's the goal. Like, I mean, we reach out, we work with our, because the way that our team's set up is like, we're the social media team, but we're in an office called strategic communication. Within strategic communication, you have the proactive team, which reaches out to news. You have the news team that's just pushes in-house things on our newsletters. You also have the science writers. You also have the marketing team. We collaborate with all of them. And so we work with the science writing team and the science research based team, to where they can kind of, they say, oh, there's this really cool story, that there's this really cool research happening, or these that might work on social if you're interested. I think one example that I have is one of our students, one of our science writers named Addie, she said, we had this tick researchers, and she titled this email TikTok on TikTok. And I was like, that, and we were like, yes. And so we like set up the meeting. I think it's gonna be an awesome conversation. So we met with them and we found out more about what they do. It's like these three scientists, and they through Penn State Extension School, where they just do tick research, because in the middle of Pennsylvania, it's really big, because depending on whether you're hunting or whether you're just walking through a wooded area, ticks are a major issue. So we were trying to figure out ways, like, how could we showcase this on social? And offhandedly, they were like, well, sometimes we race the ticks. And we were like, wait, what? And like, yeah, we set up like little tick games so we see how fast they are, so we compete. And we were like, yes, go with that. And so, and we said, are you else? And we asked them, are you comfortable with like recording this yourself or sending us clips? And one of them was like, yeah, I'm on TikTok all the time. I think I can put it together. So they put together this really cool video where like they set up 3 different species of ticks on like a racetrack in the office, and they just set them free. But then they highlight each one, how fast they're, but then each tick they spotlight, they give like some in-depth research and knowledge about, like, oh, this is the tick where if this happens and this happens, this tick is brought up here. So like, while it's funny and it's fun, you're also getting really cool information.
That is so cool. And so you identify these potential topics, and then you find the personalities. Is that sort of and it seems like they're agreeable to it. Like,
that's the conversations always starts with what are you comfortable with doing? Like, whether it's a student, whether it's faculty, whether it's staff, it's always like, so what do you have experience doing? What are you comfortable trying? And making them feel comfortable with the idea. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I know we have this film team that does amazing things, but a lot of times for us on the social team too, what we see is videos that aren't polished work, as long as we're like upfront about it, not trying to make it pretend to be something it's not, to where this is just a fun video. Like, you could tell it's recorded yourself. And I think once they start feeling comfortable with that idea, then who wants to do it can take the lead. So that's basically what we're pushing. Like, we want to start working more with researchers and faculty, and then we have our students doing the same thing, coming up with these ideas to figure out ways to collaborate, because we're Penn State, we're not just student life, so we have to make sure we're bringing everyone in, and then also alumni in that same fashion.
And it's not just TikTok. I'm sure you find the content that fits the channel.
Yeah, I think we have 6 or 7 channels. So we have Facebook, Twitter/X, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Those are our main spaces. And some content goes across all platforms. We think it works there. But sometimes we go in things like, oh, this is just an Instagram story, because our Instagram audience is our current students and young alumni. And we think this falls right into that sweet spot. Or this is just for TikTok. This is the only people we're going to be interested in are the people who are 12 years old and higher, who are learning about Penn State and just want to get excited about it. And it's like their dream school. So like, and this is directed towards those people who don't really know much about Penn State or don't really much about the college experience, but they're in the beginning of thinking about it. So we want to connect with them there. Or if it's a LinkedIn, we're like, oh, so this is like more of the professionals platform that's also kind of an older alumni base. The same thing with TikTok. So how can we get this group to remember that, one, there's still value in your degree, especially on LinkedIn. So we want to push that idea of like value in the Penn State degree, achievements that are happening, like these cool things are still happening here. While then there's also that aspect of it where, like, on Facebook, you want to say, here's your opportunity to reminisce about the times you had at Penn State, or this is the experience that your sons or daughters are having on campus that you might want to be proud of that they're doing. So we always think about these different platforms in those different ways. And so, so it's not a uniform thing.
I think that's great. So you're optimizing each platform. You're optimizing the content for each platform, which I think that's the way to go. Excellent. So do you have one last question for you? So now that you're the boss, is there something that you've done in the past that maybe you wouldn't agree to now that you're in charge?
So you've seen me for a good portion of my journey of being like, and
yes,
I had my first instinct is always to be a bit rogue in terms of like, I'm just going to try and see what happens. And that kind of started from the beginning, from like it was a complete lack of oversight that led to me being who I am today and like figuring it out on the run. And so I think
it's so good.
So I think one of the big things I did was, like, when I was working at Harvard, I was in charge of the Instagram. So I just saw a documentary by the Beastie Boys called I Shot This. And basically they gave 50 cameras out to 50 members of the audience and said, just record and then give us the cameras later. And they built the documentary based on all this fan footage. So it's like, that's a cool idea. what if I gave the password of our Instagram account to 26 students? Like, I didn't even know if Instagram would accept that many people with the app. Turns out they do.
Mm-hmm.
You can have as many people on the app posting as you want, I guess. And so I met with all of them. I sent them all emails and I said, this is my idea. And it was based around this thing called Housing Day, where they decide where they learn what house they're going to be moved into after their first year. And so it just seems like this really cool thing with all these different perspectives. And I'm like, it's a shame that we only capture it in like pictures and you don't get the feeling. It doesn't feel as chaotic as it is in real life. So if I get all these personalities, all these different types of people to post at the same time in stories, because I want it to feel like it's just like you're popping up here, you're popping up there. And then every now and then it'd be that one person who really doesn't care about the day. So they're doing something totally different. So it's like a quiet moment. Then it goes back. And so like, and so I thought about it and I put it together and it was just, and I thought it was really cool. But as you said, I wouldn't do it.
What's the but?
So there's better ways to do it now. And I think the biggest thing is like, what, like with stories, like you have those sections. And I realized like, if you have 26 people and they post 5 times each, that is so many sections and no one's even getting to the end. And so I think I learned a lot from that. And I could still take that thing, like that idea that I originally had, but then I could just say, hey, you, and you, I want you to all to send us footage from that you're gathering from this day. And then we can put it together as a reel or a short or a full YouTube video or TikTok. And then we can push it into something that's digestible in 15, 30, 60, 90 seconds. And you can kind of get that same feel. Then you can actually control like what people see in the beginning. Because one of the things that we're experimenting now is like, we're learning like if you have these longer videos, and that include a lot of people, maybe in the first 3 to 7 seconds, which is the most important part where we want to grab the most attention, maybe chop it up and introduce everyone who's going to be a part of it in really quick succession. So then like, especially if you're doing students, because then people see their friends instantly like, oh, I know that person. Mm-hmm. They'll comment, they'll share like, oh, watch this video. Mm-hmm. And then it'll grow. And so the idea I think is great. And I still utilize and think about that to this day and still have elements of it. Putting it in stories, it was like diminishing returns. Like in the beginning, it was cool, but then but by the time you get to the 50th post and then you see that you still have 60 left, it's like, I'm done. And then you move on.
Yeah, that's a long story. So you learned from it. Now you've made it better, but you still have the essence of like, let's try it.
Yeah, I do.
Let's go. Yeah, you still have that sort of mentality, which I think is great. I think experimentation is so important.
It makes a lot of people nervous. Like but especially that. Like I don't even think I get like, if someone pitched that idea to me now, it's like, we're going to give 26 random people this account. What do you think? I probably would still say, okay, let's give it a shot to see what happens. But just like I was that day, I was nervous the whole day that someone was going to do something that they weren't supposed to do and I wouldn't catch it. I agree 100% though. Like I learned a lot from that. And it's just a cool story to kind of like tell people like, well, I've grown a lot in terms of like how non-risk averse I was. And it's a little bit different now, but that spirit is still there. It's like, let's try things.
Sure. Okay. So Kellen, since this is Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager, what is your confession?
So I guess it would center around, let's end it how we started. It's like symmetry. So like we started with that story about like how I did the social media report and I got the job at BU. Well, around that time, like there was like months in between grad school and getting hired, like I think 9 months. And I was just applying 5 jobs a night. I was like working at Best Buy in like a nursing home. And just every time I get home, just 5 jobs at night. And then I started realizing like no one's pulling me in. So I started looking at the application. I started noticing a lot of people were asking for HTML experience, like coding experience. I had none. I had never learned. So I said, I wonder if I could put that on the application and then teach myself how to code before I got hired. And so I was like, okay, and I was like, it's risky because like if somehow I get hired before and I don't know how to code, it's going to come out and I'll lose my job. So then like instantly I put it on, I applied for a job specifically from that BU job because email marketing is based off like a little bit of HTML and CSS. So I said I could do this. And so I told them and I'm like, and I, during the whole interview process, like I bought a book at Barnes & Noble and I'm looking at Code Academy and every single day I'm like reading multiple chapters, doing exercises. And it turns out at the end of the hiring process, there was an HTML test that I had to take.
Oh,
and
they were serious.
Yeah. And so like, And then like I passed the test. And so like, but it's like, thank you. I'm glad. But yeah, ended up passing the test, and it was, and I successfully taught myself in a matter of like a month how to like do enough coding to where I could get the job. And then like from there, I took what I learned, and I just learned on the fly more, because a lot of coding, especially my time working at MIT, I learned it's just looking up like what code works for here, how can I do this,
Oh,
and then
it's
insert.
true.
And
So true.
I didn't know that at the time, but to get my foot in even into the door, I'd had to take a risk, and because it's like, if no one's hiring me, so I have to do something that's different, and it worked out. So I wouldn't even be here if I wouldn't have like just stretched a little bit in terms of what I knew.
I love it. I love it. That is a super great confession and a really good tip. And sometimes I think that the best way to learn something is like trial by fire.
Yeah.
That really gets you up to speed.
And like I'm a child, I just in college, like I spent a lot of
Did
time.
you start to say I'm a child?
I'm a child of like early internet, to where like everything was available, and like for like whether it was legitimately available, or you just popped up. Like I think of like CNET used to have like download.com, where you could download trial versions of any software that exists. And so I was like, oh, I taught myself how to do Photoshop based off that. I taught myself how to use like a Fruity Loops for music production when I had a radio station to be able to put an intro together. I could teach myself how to code. And it's like, it's a little bit of delusional confidence, but like, I think you have to have that, because like social, and it's worked with me so far, because social is constantly changing. So like, as you get a new platform, you can't be intimidated by what's next. You have to say, oh, I can learn this, or I could at least I have to know enough to at least be able to talk to the people who know it well, because I never want to be that person in the room who's like, either has unrealistic expectations because they don't know what they're talking about, and so they're asking too much of people, or that you realize you're so disconnected from what exists that like, if you were to be removed from your management position, you're like, I don't know what else I could do. So that's my biggest fear. So
Th There is wisdom in that, my friend. I love it. And with that, Kellen, thank you so
no
much. This
problem.
was a great conversation, and thank you for spending your time with us.
Of course, anytime. Yeah, you know, you reach out to me at any time. I think this was fun. I look forward to hearing the rest of your episodes. I'm so glad that you have this show. Very proud of you. So keep it up.
Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Mallory Wilsey, and so many others of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.